In Learning Objective A, we're going to define a variable in the population. But before we do that, let's define even more words related to this chapter. The first is statistics. It's a branch of math that is dealing with collecting, organizing, analyzing, and interpreting data. Okay. So then what is data? Well, data is just information used in statistics, and it's usually numerical. But it doesn't have to be. For example, a numerical type of data would be if I asked you how tall you are. You would give me a numerical answer. However, there's a different type of data. Make note of this. It's called categorical. That would be if the answer isn't numerical. For example, if I said, what color are your eyes? You would say red, green or blue. A variable then, just like it is in algebra class, is a character that's used to represent a person or a thing, and we do use variables in statistics. A population is just a set of all individuals or objects being studied, so it's everything. Whereas a sample is a subset of a population. So maybe our population, for example, was the entire high school, and I just took a sample of the 8th graders. So that would be a subset of our entire population. A survey consists of gathering facts or opinions. You can do it through an interview or a questionnaire. A census is a survey of the entire U.S. population, and this happens every 10 years. A representative sample is a sample that has the same characteristics as the population, which is an important part of statistics. If you're going to take a sample, it should represent the population in which you are trying to capture. So more formally, you are going to be asked to define what variable is being studied, what is the population, and who is the sample. So if we read this example, let's see if you can figure it out. A medical laboratory technician draws 10 milliliters of blood in order to determine the number of white blood cells in a patient's bloodstream. What is the variable, the population, and the sample? Now, as we read it, we want to determine the number of white blood cells. So that is the variable, is the number of white blood cells. Is what they're going to be measuring. Now, what is the sample and what's the population? If you look at the first thing, you might see the sample a little more clearly. The technician draws 10 milliliters of blood. So our sample is the 10 milliliters of patient's blood. So then to determine what is the population in which this sample was taken, just be thoughtful. If we're taking 10 milliliters from the patient's blood, the entire population would therefore be all the patient's blood. I just want to look at letter A for this one, and here's a scenario. In Boston, there were 2,145 inline skaters chosen for a survey and were asked to clarify their ability as being either beginner, average, or advanced. They were also then asked how much protective gear that they wore, and it was recorded. The data has been organized here in this table of our entire people that we surveyed. So here's the question, just part A only. Are the data here based on the sample or an entire population? In this case, the scenario is they surveyed 2,145 inline skaters of all the skaters, so this is considered a sample, whereas the population would be all of the inline skaters in the city of Boston. Actually, let's continue on and answer letter B too, since it talks about the variable. Question is here in this data, what variables are actually being presented? Well, there's two things that they're actually looking at. They're looking at the skill level of the skater, and then they're looking at the amount of protective gear.